had apologies, I know, from Councillor Galvin and also from Councillor Curry, and I gather that Councillor Van Dijk is joining us as his substitute.
That is hoped for. I'm not sure if she's logged on yet, but I know if she's able to, she'll be joining.
Right. And then of officers, Rob Dennis can't be here, and Catherine Smith very kindly joined us because Dave Harris can't be with us. So welcome, Catherine. Any more apologies? Then declarations of interest. Are there any? Right. Actions from the last meeting. You'll see them on pages 5 to 14. We have circulated the minutes, and they picked out the actions arising. And I'll just ask if anyone has any matters they'd like to raise from that. Are there any? Are there any, please?
If I may, Howard, just briefly, it's on item 21.
Yeah.
Where we're looking at the refill project.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's not a major issue, but I just feel we need, in reading the action in the penultimate column, I just felt it was a bit weak, and you know, things like loss of revenues and so on. Now, I understand, of course, with a theatre, you're not expecting someone to walk into a theatre to fill their bottle up or something. I realise that's an exception, but I would hope that a slightly stronger kind of policy across the council, because we do need to set a bit of an example with things such as this.
We're going to cover that actually later on.
I shall leave that for now.
Then, but
sorry.
In general, I agree with you, and I think we ought to ask the council to actually to do what it says on the tin, in the sense that we can't go on having bottles and that sort of thing, which are single use. And we can make alternative provision, but I'll mention it under any other business anyway.
Oh, I should keep quiet, Howard. Sorry, thank you.
Always glad to hear you.
As long as I can, anyway.
Right. Okay. Are there any others? I think most of what is here is pretty self-explanatory. I have been through them. Yeah. There are one or two that need, I think, to be regarded as not completed but ongoing, and I particularly mentioned action 11, where we are still having to go at Ariba and need to keep that pressure up as far as we can, although we know they've got difficulties with their present business model. And same, I think, under the next lot on page 10, action 4, I think that the tree planting program, that is ongoing and it needs to be said so. Okay. The same, I think, with item 7 as well on page 11. Otherwise, I have no other points I wanted to raise. Does anyone else?
No, you have no one else, Howard.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll press on. Okay. Well, we have I think we've got Michael Edwards here to talk to us about the active travel subgroup. So, Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman. Right. Okay. Yeah, members will have seen the report there under item 4. Hopefully, it is self-explanatory. But what we think would be a really good idea is if we had a subgroup looking at active travel for the council. So this will help us develop the overall strategy for active travel in Medway, and that obviously includes capital schemes, but also promoting behavioural change through walking and cycling initiatives. And it also a subgroup would also help us to provide direction on emerging opportunities for active travel schemes, and it also be a sort of a critical friend and enable us to review and analyse, scrutinise the progress of schemes and initiatives. And of course, that would then report back to the Climate Change Member Advisory Board on the progress against the various actions in the plan. So obviously open it up for any comments or questions on that, but yeah, that's the proposal, Chairman.
Well, I think it's a very good proposal. I think we are developing this, and you'll see, you know, our cycling policies and our general development is ongoing, as far as we can also draw down capital as well. And I think it does need a lot more work on it. It's you know, it's something that will always get longer and longer, if you know what I mean. But I wonder if we have 3 members who would like to go on to that committee. First one, I think, obviously needs to be Stuart, if he doesn't mind, because he's always cycling around and looking active.
Yeah, I'm so glad you suggested that. It saves my embarrassment of me putting my name forward, Howard. And I might suggest you also choose somebody who walks almost everywhere. And I'll let you guess who that is on the group.
And Howard, you've got Vince and Stuart are indicating. I know you're seeking to nominate members onto your
Okay, Vince.
Yeah, thanks very much indeed, Howard. I think Stuart might be referring to me as someone who walks over. That is true. I'm happy for others to fulfil this role. I would actually seek to potentially have, I know she's not a member of the advisory group, but Lauren Edwards, who is a very active cycler, and I'd encourage, no relation to Michael Edwards, for the avoidance of doubt.
Okay, we can't have any stitch-ups.
No, indeed. So I'd be very happy to. I know she would really add value to this. So I think
Fine,
the concept is right. Certainly, I would, because I think it's quite notably not in there around public transport. And although it is clearly 2 different things, I think there is a need to have that conversation as well as part of this. So the starting point, of course, is, can we get people out of cars? I think that is the starting point. And I've, as people may be aware, I've been campaigning for that since I was 9 years old. I lost that election back in 1987, but there we go. So I think absolutely to have that as part of the conversation. So to have a session for that subgroup with New Venture, Ariba, ASD, Southeastern, not least actually, because if people are walking and cycling, they may also want to be using the public transport if it's affordable and reliable and safe. So I get where the terms of reference for the subgroup are. And I just think it needs to have a flavour of public transport, but not to be dominated by it, because I accept entirely, for all of the public health reasons, if nothing else, actually walking and cycling are a good thing, as well as the climate benefits too. So, yeah. So, all of
Okay. Well, I think that the great thing is here that I'm trying to get a climate, as I know Michael is, where we don't do this by compulsion. I think where a lot of councils have gone wrong on climate change is you start off by ban cars and everybody will have to walk sort of attitude, you know, and I think that's not the right way of doing it. I think you've got to encourage people to enjoy exercise, etc., and do it that way, which is the way of free society runs, in my judgment. So I'll very happily have those 2 nominations. Is there a third? Deafening silence. Come on.
You have got, Stuart is indicating separately on a wider issue, I think, Howard.
Yeah, well, let's settle this first.
Yeah.
I think that in that case, then, if they can't do it, I'm just wondering about Gary. Would you possibly like to do that? I know you have an interest.
Yeah, a press man's better than a volunteer, I guess.
Do you mind?
No, that's all right. Oh,
Thank you very much.
Well done, yeah.
So we have 3. I put to you that we have 3 members, council members. That's Gary Hackwell, Lauren Edwards, and Stuart Tranter on that committee, and such officers as you want to take it forward, Michael. All right. Now, Stuart, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, it is actually very brief, but I really wanted to reinforce your very good point about winning rather than persuading people. It is always best to make the alternative more attractive. And I hope that will be the emphasis here. People will cycle and walk ultimately because they would prefer to do that. And our job is to make that safe and easy and accessible, and rather than, you know, as you say, cutting other things off. And I know I'm just repeating what you said, Howard, but it is that important. I think we need to go forward in that way.
Okay, well, I think that's fine, and I think that the other thing which I think is quite important in all this is that we actually keep on looking all the time for money from the government, various initiatives that keep on coming out. There's always one or two of these initiatives. Some of them are quite small beer, but they're worth having. And the one thing I think that is holding us up, and one thing I'd like the group really to have a look at, is whether we can get more funding for bases, you know, secure bases to lock up cycles. Because I think this is the key to actually promoting it. I think that the sort of cage that we've got in outside the council offices, for example, that sort of thing, but where we can actually make sure that, you know, people can leave their bikes safely, particularly as there's not only the bikes that are there, there's also the bikes that have additional power units and so on. And they're bikes, and those power unit bikes are very, very expensive to lose. So I think that if we can actually think about where you would want those in the borough, you know, perhaps half a dozen locations to start with, if you like, and you know, where we might be able to draw down some money for that from part of, you know, one of the various transport budgets, if that's possible, or indeed from one of the kind of sustrans, you know, might be able to do it. So can I just suggest that we think about that? I'll throw that one, if I may, at that small group to bring something forward.
Yeah. So happy to take that on, Howard, and indeed Chatham train station is a very good cycle hub there as well.
There is, yes.
So you have got Michael is indicating, Howard, because there might be a few comments that Michael wants to make back in response.
Yes, I'm glad to hear those, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just to wrap up a few points there. It's really good that the members are supportive of the subgroup. So what I've agreed with a colleague in Democratic Services is that he will be in touch to finalise that membership. But yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. Obviously, I know Councillor Maple's point about including public transport in that group as well, and I think that the aim of this is on active travel, on walking and cycling, and I don't think we should lose sight of that. But I think Councillor Maple's absolutely right that there is a relationship with public transport there as well, and they're all interlinked. They're all good sustainable transport options. So yes, I see no reason why we can't include consideration of public transport in there as well. So thank you very much.
Okay, I think what we need to do with it is really to do what we always do, which is to think that having formed the committee is a tremendous success. It's 3 years on. What have you achieved? You know, and then I think you can work backwards to where we are now. I think that's the way of doing it, because if you're not all agreed on where you want to get to it, then frankly you're never going to get there. So I think that would be my suggestion, only a suggestion.
Absolutely, yes.
And I'd like to be kept informed, obviously, of what's going on there. If somebody can, you know, when you take notes of the meeting, perhaps somebody can make sure that those go up to the group.
Absolutely,
okay.
Yes, I completely agree there. And I think one of the key considerations of the group will be our emerging walking and cycling infrastructure plan as well. So the group will be really valuable in getting to grips with that as we move forward, and that will be the plan for walking and cycling infrastructure over the next 5 to 10 years.
And I think also we've got to push much harder for these walking to school groups and so on, because I want to see I don't see any reason why any school shouldn't have those, or every school should have them, I think. And it's time that was pushed. Okay. Now, the next item we were due to have was on procurement, but unfortunately Mike Kelly's got called away and can't be with us this afternoon. So he's asked whether we can bring that forward to the next meeting, please. I'm sorry about that, but you know, I think you'll know from various other matters that he's been working extremely hard behind the scenes to assist us with a number of projects, and I'm afraid that you know, it takes its toll. So I think that we'll have him at the next meeting, please. Okay. Can we then go on to item 5, which is funding? And I wanted really to make sure that, in fact, I don't know whether you would like to take us through this, Vicky, but basically I wanted to highlight the work that's being done by the climate change team and others across the council in actually bringing money to the table for these initiatives, because it isn't easy. And I think that the amount that actually has been brought to the table has been excellent, really. And long may it continue. But I don't know if there's anything you'd particularly like to say about this, Vicky? Or indeed, Richard?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Doe. Are you happy for me to
Yeah.
go ahead, Richard? Yeah. So just to echo what you've said, really, this isn't just the climate response team that have identified the funding. It's teams that are going out there and horizon scanning and identifying opportunities. And we've just been, really successful with a number of bids there. I won't go into details of all of them. But just to say as well that we've got a climate emergency funding subgroup that's been set up, and we've met a number of times now, and that's key officers that have got actions against that priority area in the action plan, just meeting to kind of consolidate our efforts to continue to look for funding opportunities and to also impress as well. So it's not just Medway Council, we're working closely with Kent County Council as well. An example of that is Behavioural Insights project that Chris and Lynn, who are both in the meeting, they're working on that at the moment, so been successful with some funding there.
I think that'd be very helpful, actually. I think that we always envisaged when we had that initial meeting with both KCC and all the district councils that there ought to be some harmony in that bidding. There must be things that we all want, as it were, if I put it bluntly. And I think that when liaising with KCC, may I strongly suggest that we actually draw their attention back to this, because I think that we need to realise that, a big bid that could actually change things in the southeast, as it were, or across Kent anyway, is going to have much more power than individual district council or even Medway Council doing it on its own.
Yeah. So Howard, you've got Vince and Andy are indicating.
Fine. So let's have Andy first and then Vince next. Andy.
Yeah, thanks, Howard. Following on from that conversation actually around funding, I noted that KCC managed to secure funding for zero emission buses amongst a number of other local authorities, and it is something that I've been encouraging in the past. And I know the council did submit a bid for ultra low emission buses back in 2019, and unfortunately wasn't successful on that occasion. But I wondered, Vicky, whether there was any further opportunities for additional bids for zero emission buses. I know that a lot of the fleet in Medway, particularly Arriva's and New Ventures fleet, are quite old and they do emit quite a lot of emissions from their vehicles. So it would go a long way to addressing the air quality issues that we've got locally. So if you've got any information on whether there's any more funding streams from the government in relation to that, that'd be great. And whether we could piggyback onto KCC's scheme as well. I don't know what the funding criteria was for their zero emission scheme that they were successful on. And then the other thing, just briefly, was
let's note that and look into it, please.
Thank you. The other thing was just briefly, it will come as no surprise to Richard that I'm asking about the levelling up fund bid. Now, I'm guessing with what's been happening in government recently that a lot of things are being delayed, but I didn't know whether there was an update on that, because that would provide some really good active travel infrastructure for Gillingham.
That's still on, isn't it, Richard?
Yes. Yeah, Howard, are you happy for me to respond to that one?
Yes, please.
And I'll just touch on the buses one as well, although Vic is ready on that one, and we've got Michael on the call as well, so others may wish to add to it. So if I just pick up the Levelling Up Fund round 2 bid that we put in, so this is Gillingham Open Lines, and as Andy says, that's going to be fantastic for us, really helpful in terms of active travel, in terms of cycle routes and walking routes. So you are right, though. You know the answer before you asked the question, Andy. So at the moment, government is in somewhat of a state of flux. Obviously, we're all waiting for the autumn statement or the fiscal statement, whatever we want to call it, nowadays next week, when there may be some further clarity. We are pushing every opportunity to seek some further clarity. We were told it was going to be November. I suspect there is the potential for hearing something following on from the 17th. But a lot of the government announcements have shifted to the right. I suppose they would with the current government, but some of the timescales are shifting out. So, for example, shared prosperity funding, we know that announcement has been delayed before we get any confirmation around that. We are pushing at ministerial level, though, Andy. Rest assured, we are pressing our case pretty hard, and we're taking every opportunity to lobby for that when we can. If that's okay, Chairman, then just in terms of the buses, I think actually KCC was successful in the round that we weren't successful in. So Birmingham were another local authority that weren't successful when they were putting in bids for their bus network as well. So a number of authorities didn't kind of make the cut. Unfortunately, we were one of those. The straight answer to the question, though, would be absolutely, Andy. If there are further opportunities to bid, we are going to seek to take them. Howard is very keen on external funding. I certainly am as well. We've said right from the get-go, the local authority, Medway Council itself, will not be able to fund all of these ambitions that we have. We are absolutely going to be reliant on external funding, government funding. So we will seek to progress that at every opportunity we can. And we would certainly want to make bids around our bus fleets that there are through those various private sector companies, given how significant that is in terms of the carbon footprint for Medway. That's it from me, Chairman. But
yeah, actually, by way of amusement or sadness in a way, I was driving into Gillingham yesterday, and I kept on passing brand new single-decker buses, which weren't advertised being electric. I hope they are, but I don't think they were, because they're making quite a noise. But I thought, hang on, we don't want a lot of new single-decker buses that are running on the wrong fuels, you know. So that's something we really do need to push with them, I think.
Yeah.
Vince.
Thanks, Howard. And yeah, I mean, Andy's absolutely right as always on this matter. I mean, I'm concerned that levelling up funding may be delayed, if not
I think we all
completely. That is a real and genuine risk, and absolutely support the comments from Andy around buses. I've heard anecdotally that Medway's biggest bus provider, we all know who they are, but I won't shame them here, have sent some of their more modern buses to the other side of the estuary, to places in Essex, because their council have got specific criteria around air quality. So if that is accurate, that is not only Medway being in a neutral place, we're in a worse place. So we need to have those.
We need to have a good look at that.
Yeah, friendly but robust. I mean, they're a commercial operation; they will do what they have to do. But that's incredibly disappointing. Because it's Medway's, particularly Medway's young people and older people who use buses exponentially more, who will end up with worse air quality and the impact on their breathing. So I agree with all of that, and hopefully, you know, in some private conversations, perhaps with our main provider, we might want to highlight that a bit more. Thank you, Richard, for your thumbs up. My reason for putting my hand up actually was around and yeah, I know the team will be working really hard to get those bids in. I'm absolutely up for where it's appropriate, working with other district, boroughs, counties, whoever. If we can get some more money into this, climate emergency doesn't recognise the boundaries of local government. So it is, you know, absolutely appropriate to have that partnership working with our higher and further education providers as well. The bit that I didn't see on there, and I'd like to get an understanding, because we have got some small amounts of money, £2,000, so it's appropriate for that. It's just where we've got any commitments through Section 106 specifically on climate emergency improvements. Now, I recognise that the Section 106 guide is due for update. So again, as part of this, I'd ask to make sure that any draft Section 106 guide moving forward has very specifically, I'd quite like to see Medway having a bit like a SIL, a specific fund where we can put that combined funding in, because we might have to have more than one development we'll have to get the relevant amount of funding. But actually there might be quite small projects which again, if we can fund that through a combined Section 106 funding for climate emergency, I think would be a really good idea, and something which I would hope even those developers, and we all know who some of those developers are, who are wobbling a bit on their contributions that they are obliged to make to Medway. I would hope that they would see that as something which is the right thing to do, even if it's financially challenging, because ultimately people will be buying their houses. They want to live in a place which has got good public transport, good air quality, etc., etc.
Well, I think you're right about on the latter point, that I think that you know, people now, certainly from the point of view of MDC, that people are looking more and more at the package they're getting, particularly as it becomes more difficult to get the money for housing. And I think there are more demands for that. And I think that the more we can persuade developers to do it, because the developers, unfortunately, have always got one awful sanction, and that is we'll go somewhere else. And I think we've got to be very clear that whatever we put onto them is something that we can sustain. And I think that's the important point. But you know, I agree with the principle of it, though. I think we should certainly look at that. Stuart, got you on my board again.
Yeah, thank you. Just a brief one on developers, if I may. We're getting better and better in planning and with the planning officers at pushing hard on landscaping schemes as more and more is coming up around the borough. And Dave Harris has organised some excellent sort of reviews of sites. And anecdotally, when I go and look at some of these sites, I'm pretty confident that what I'm looking at, it does not bear much resemblance to these wonderful green forests that we saw when they were begging us to approve their application. And as time goes by, they get thinner and thinner. Now, I don't have an answer to my own sort of question and problem here, but I wonder if we need a more robust holding developers to account over a longish period regarding their plans and management of places, that all these wonderful trees that we keep pressing for and so on, actually not only just materialize, but they are maintained and they stay there. I don't know the answer to it, but I just had this intuitive thought that once the eye is off the ball with some of these developments and we're all moving on to next year's, they get forgotten. So I just throw that out there. Yeah.
Okay, can I ask Catherine to comment on that, please? Is she there?
Yeah.
Thank you for your comments. And I've made a note of those. I will raise those with Dave specifically. And I'll get Dave to provide a response to you, Chair, outside of the meeting, so that can be sent through to members. I would envisage that Dave may raise issues around resourcing and the ability to be able to revisit schemes on a regular basis. I completely get the issue. What's the point of seeking to put the effort into achieving a sustainable and quality design if we're not actually seeing that achieved and maintained in the longer term? That doesn't deliver the quality of environment that we want to see in Medway and the quality we want to see associated with new development. So I'll take that away with and to discuss with Dave. I believe that he is seeking to arrange a member presentation on the issue of what development is contributing towards climate change mitigation, using examples of things we have been able to achieve through the planning process, but also maybe that's an opportunity for members to be engaging with developers as well regarding some of the additional contributions and approaches that we can see coming forward. So I'll discuss this with Dave next week when he's back from leave, but I would just, I suppose, sound a note of caution with regards to the resources within the service and the ability to do maybe detailed checking. But it doesn't mean I don't think it can't be done, but we may need to talk about how that can be achieved.
Yeah, if I may briefly come back on that, Catherine, as I was speaking, I knew full well that that was going to be the issue, and it doesn't necessarily follow that it will be the planning department that is responsible for that. What I'm saying is, since we have in recent years become more and more focused on better and better landscaping, we need some kind of mechanism, I suppose, through, I don't know how to think about how we check that it happens, because some of those, plans we accept take some years to mature. So how are we looking after that? And should we? I don't know. It's the question I'm just putting out there for consideration.
I think it's a very sound question. I think that actually it is something that we've got to look into. One of the things we are doing, of course, is we are opening a dialogue with some of the key developers, as Catherine will know, and Dave Harris and I are meeting some of them just to see, what they can offer us in the way of climate change. What in terms of, we tell them what we're doing, they tell us what they're doing, and are there any ways and opportunities from working better together. So that's the kind of carrot, if you like. But I agree that it'd be very unfortunate if substantial Section 106's delivery is being impaired because we don't have the resources to do it, and it's something that needs to be looked at. Cost versus value.
Right. I'll leave it there. Thank you, Howard.
Okay. Gary.
Yeah, thank you, Howard. Just to go back on the buses, for those of you that are attending a meeting a bit later this evening, I will be explaining that the company that we didn't name that has a depot in Gillingham, 2/3 of their buses are either Euro 5 or Euro 6, and they are planning to replace some of the older buses in the next few months.
Excellent. That's a good start. Thank you for that. Okay. Richard.
Thank you, Howard. Just to sweep up on a couple of the actions there then. So Gary stole my thunder on that last one. Thank you very much, Gary. Excellent answer. However, we will just track back through the comment that Vince made just about that certain company's deployment of their fleet. So Michael will pick that up just in terms of ongoing conversations with them, just to bottom that issue, Vince, whether there's any credence to it or not. There's been some discussion with members around Section 106 and how that could be potentially deployed into kind of climate change measures, environmental considerations. We'll certainly have that as part of our thinking, as part of the refresh of Section 106s, and obviously Catherine's been part of that debate. And Howard, you are right. In terms of the landscaping of the sites and that point that Stuart raised, I think all of us have seen sometimes there are CGIs that are produced that don't always land exactly as they were promised as they were going through the process. I've got to say I've seen a number that have, though, as well. So a number of developers are staying kind of honest and to their plans that they submitted. And of course, across the industry, climate change is a significant issue for developers, not least because there are efficiency gains for them that they can make in terms of the products that they are using as well. So I do think that's a live and an open debate that is ongoing across the sector. And as you said, Howard, you and Dave are meeting with a number of developers to make sure that we're working together on some of these considerations.
I think so. And it might be that, and I'm not going to jump the gun on this or try and do something that's not doable, but it might be that we actually recognise when we have our various systems of awards, like design awards and so on, we really do pay perhaps have an additional award within that for the best contractor on climate change developments during the year, so that we can highlight that. I think that would be very, that would be working with them as well.
Yeah, very good.
Okay, well, if I may move on now to the business case studies. And our first case studies, you'll see them there. You've got the three that are here. I think you know about AM Expresso. Chatter Hygiene was not one that I knew about, but it's quite interesting. But would you like to say anything about these, Katie?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Doe. So hopefully in the papers, everyone did get a chance to have a look at the case studies that we have up on our website and how we've been sharing them. To give some brief background on why we have these case studies, there's two main reasons. The first being that behavioural science and behavioural psychology shows that people and organisations are more likely to take action if they're seeing their peers do so. So that's part of the reason. So for example, when it comes to something like solar panels, a business might be quite nervous, but if they hear from a fellow business that they've done well, if they find out about kind of the costs involved and the savings, they are more likely to take that step than if the council was to go to them and say it's a good idea. So that's why we're sharing those. And then secondly, it's a really nice opportunity to celebrate what's happening in Medway, celebrate that Medway and our businesses are taking action, that they are kind of leading in a lot of things, and the kind of the opportunities that are already in Medway. As well as, yeah, so giving that both the aspect of helping others, but also celebrating as well. But actually with us tonight, we're very grateful to have Stephen Russell join us from Copper Rivet Distilleries to give us kind of a verbal case study on what they're doing and kind of the opportunities and the barriers that they face. So I will pass over to Stephen now.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks, Katie. I suppose hopefully a good number of you know our business already, and probably most of you are more used to seeing a slightly older Russell with even more grey hairs than me. But I'm really pleased to.
He says you gave them to him.
But I'm really pleased to join you. Actually, it's I joined at the beginning of the meeting. I hope you don't mind, and it's really wonderful to see the work that you're doing. And Katie's quite right that seeing what other businesses are doing, and in all honesty, we'll come on to barriers. Some of the grants funding that they might have accessed or whatever to help, that with that extra push on what it is really, really helpful to businesses. And I know that my dad was at a lunch, just a working example of the stuff that you're doing that has an impact. He was at lunch yesterday or the day before, I think, and came back, shared the presentation with me, and it had some links in there that I wasn't familiar with, which we'll follow up on. So thanks for all of that. I won't take too much more of your time on that. I thought I would just, without labouring the point, for those that don't, I'll tell you a little bit about us.
Yes,
I'll talk about what it may be obvious, but for the avoidance of doubt, what a distillery's impact on the environment is. Let's be honest, you can't sugarcoat it. They are energy intensive businesses. I'll talk about our sustainability goals as a business and where they come from, what we have already done and what we do, what we would like to do. I can't honestly call it a plan. I'll call it a plan, but actually it's a wish list. And then, perhaps why we're not, what's holding us back. So, we are family owned, family run distillery here in Chatham. We're actually quite unusual in that we're one of the only fully family funded and run distilleries in the country who are doing the whole process from grain to glass, and one of the only multidisciplinary distilleries in the country that's got our structure. And we know that we've had a lot of great support from the local community, including the council. So I do know that plenty of you know us quite well, so I won't labour that. But we make gin, vodka and whiskey, and that is where we really are slightly different, because most whiskey distilleries will make gin and vodka, but they won't do it all from farm to glass. And that's really part of how we're different. Because of our structure, however, we, as you all know, we're not a social business, but there is a sense of purpose of why we're in Medway. I was born in Chatham. Dad, as you know, is very, very involved in Medway. And one of the things that we want to do, and it sounds a bit grandiose, but it is a genuine goal that we have, and it's even written down somewhere, which is very unusual for us, is we want to put Chatham on the map as a centre of excellence, global centre of excellence for distilling. And I think if you think like that and think as a family business, we think in terms of generations, not in terms of investor reporting cycles or financial year ends. And with that in mind, sustainability and the climate is mega important to us. It's important to everybody these days, let's face it. But I would say that we think perhaps more broadly when we think about sustainability. And for us, sustainability includes our impact on the local community and creating good local jobs, which ultimately will have an impact on the climate because people are commuting less, and have somewhere local to go and visit, and so on and so forth. So social fabric and community placemaking is actually one of our sustainability goals, and we think, we think broadly. Obviously, I said I would talk about what a distillery does to the environment, but the big impact there is transport of goods and liquid. There is the use of energy to heat. In order to distill, you have to heat liquid up to evaporate the alcohol. But then there's the next thing, which is the use of water, because once you've heated it up and evaporated the alcohol, you have to condense the alcohol back into liquid, and therein you're using water for cooling. And then the final thing is obviously waste, and you need to do something with that waste. Those are the the sort of 4 big pillars of our negative, if you like, impact on the environment. Our goals, I've already mentioned one of them, which is really to strengthen the local economy to the extent we can. I'm a firm believer that a strong local economy and done in the right way will ultimately serve the climate well. Our next goal is to optimize energy consumption per unit of production, per litre of alcohol produced. And then finally, in our current set of goals, we want to optimize the use of clean water. Obviously, water scarcity is a thing in its own right, but clearly, cleaning that water, takes energy. So there is a climate change angle to that particular goal. So what have we done so far already? Well, one of the things that I think is often overlooked with the sort of very PRable, we unfortunately, our competitor set are all very well funded, have largely raised lots of money from outside investors if they are young businesses like us, or they're enormous conglomerates, and they tend to do things which, frankly, I find a little bit greenwashy and headline grabbing. But one of the biggest things I think that we've done so far for broad sustainability, but also from a climate change perspective, is that we brought a derelict building back to life. We didn't build a new building. That was an option. Stick something up on some agricultural land, but bring the pump house back from dereliction, I think has had a huge sort of effect. We would otherwise have. By the way, tell me if you want me to pause or if you want me just to run through, and we'll come back for questions. So that's the first thing. I mentioned as well, look, we've gone from 0 to 29 full-time equivalent employees. We're not a massive business, but that's it's more than 0. And a good number of those are, well, it's a good mix of jobs actually. As those of you that have been to the Pump Room restaurant know, we have some great hospitality people, but we also employ engineers and scientists from the local university, and I think that local community placemaking has ultimately a positive impact. I mentioned that transport is a big thing. We're one of the very few distilleries in the country that sources our grain as locally as we do. And certainly when it comes to our whiskey, I think, unfortunately, this is an unresearched claim. I'm going to make it anyway. We probably have the lowest food miles of any whiskey that's available on the market. You know, the round trip for the liquid is about 10 miles. You know, from the field to the distillery. We're fortunate enough that we've managed to work with with Good Food Wines actually to store our barrels. So we have our barrel store about a mile from the distillery. Then it comes back to the distillery to be hand bottled here. That's another point, by the way. We're doing as much bottling as possible by hand. Quite how long we'll be able to do that, I don't know. Some of the kind of more broadly distributed products than the whiskey are done. It is mechanized bottling, but we work with that. So a very small round trip for the products, the whiskey in particular. This year, sorry, by which I mean our financial year, we did a huge amount of work to optimize our workflow. So I mentioned, our job is to heat stuff up and cool it down. And what we've done is we've changed our shift patterns so that once we're hot, we stay hot for as long as possible, and we don't try and reheat. And equally, we use downtimes like weekends to do as much cooling as possible. So that's something that per litre of alcohol produced has had a very big impact on our energy consumption. We, as a distillery, have what we call it's difficult to do this bit without really starting to wax lyrical about how amazing our spirits are, but I'll just short circuit it by saying we have what we call a low and slow philosophy when it comes to production. That is to say, a bit like if you think about cooking, when you cook at low temperature and you take your time, you get more flavor out of your food. Well, we do that it's no different with, heating up grain and fermenting to a beer, and then also the distillation. And also if you take your time so taking your time, but that has a corollary impact on the environment, because we do low temperature distillation, so we're not heating up as much. Actually, the mashing in begins at a much lower temperature than the industry average, because we want to take our time to extract the sugars. So that's something else that we do, not actually driven really by looking at the environment, but going for the quality of the distillate. But it has a nice corresponding impact on the environment. Lots of you might already know, I mentioned waste. One of the big sources of waste for us is the grain. Once we've extracted the sugar, we have the spent grain. Some of you will have been to the restaurant, and we use a little bit of that in our bread, but that's not the biggest impact. Actually, we send it directly back to the farm that it came from, and it's used through the winter to feed cattle. And herein is quite an interesting one. So we all know that cows are supposed to be bad for climate change. We looked at using the same grain doing anaerobic digestion to create biomethane to put into the grid. When we did the calculations, actually feeding the cows had a better carbon impact for us than turning it into biomethane. And I think that's because the way that we're doing it, we're sending it directly back to the farm. It isn't going to an animal feed factory. So there is no additional energy to the animal feed component that would otherwise be there. And the second is, of course, anaerobic digestion is not an energy-free process. So I'll be honest, I was a bit disappointed because, you know, I think anaerobic digestion is more exciting and more PRable, to be honest. But anyway, we decided not to do that because the impact was not as big. We this year also introduced, I mentioned water. This year we introduced a closed loop system in our brewery, in the brewery part of our process, which just, you know, it's closed loop, so we'll use less water. And then we, one bit on waste, our whiskey packaging in particular. If you look at our packaging, we don't have any packaging which is not either completely recyclable, which is one thing, or not biodegradable, and that is definitely the case in our whiskey. We've got quite broad plans for the future. One which is super exciting is to use our location right here by the marina to introduce a closed loop cooling system and use that massive body of water as a way of cooling the distillery down, and that would have a huge impact on our water consumption and also energy consumption. And by our calculations, you know, I think lots of people locally might think that we're much bigger than we are, but of course in reality we're not that big, and we've done calculations to the extent we can, and you know, it's such a large body of water, we cannot materially impact the temperature of that water such that it would be, you know, of any damage to the marine life. We, as part of that project, so we, by the way, just so you know, we're in conversation, we've had conversations with Medway Council, but Chatham Maritime Trust supportive, Homes England supportive, and MDL Marinas also supportive. So that's one which is really exciting. It's quite different. I think it would be something that would get quite a lot of interest, and you know, it looks like it's something that is got a decent chance of being a goer, subject to the engineering and the cost, of course. As part of that, we, you know, before the heat gets to the water, we would like to try and find ways to use it and not just get rid of it. We generate about 10 megawatt hours a week, which I think I did some quick calculations. It's about 10 houses worth. So, you know, we would quite like to try to create a mini heat network where, you know, certainly the marina heat their hot water, certainly our restaurant, the heating we need. Lots of you will know it gets very chilly in there in the winter. Maybe MHS homes or something like that, where we could disperse some of the heat before it goes in, and then of course it would have even less of an impact on the and I also think that would be quite interesting and exciting. We have things called spent lees. Basically, once you've done the first distillation, called wash distillation, and you've got the spirit, most of the spirit out, what you're left with is a very, very nutrient rich, protein rich water, basically, you know, sort of you know, the grain residual, it's a bit like grain residual water. That can be used as fertilizer. It could be used for fertilizer, for nutrition stock for marine life, something that we would like to explore, probably with the Environment Agency, to introduce it to the river. It certainly happens in Scotland to positive effect. You know, pipe those spent leads into the sea. That would have a big impact, in energy impact actually, because otherwise it just goes into as trade effluent and has to be cleaned, which no one wants. Would like to use our pretty big footprint to generate energy as well. We have a big roof, as you know, and a solar array up there. Those of you that have been here in the winter today, a great example, I know on Gun Wharf, if you were at the front of Gun Wharf today, you probably would have felt, the along our seawall there would be amazing to have some wind turbines, micro wind turbines. Yeah. And then finally, we'd like to secure storage, barrel storage and bottling in the local area. That's quite a big deal, actually. Lots of people don't, when they start whiskey distilleries, one of the things that all of my colleagues in the English whiskey industry underestimated is how quickly you get to a point of having rather a lot of barrels that need storing, and you very quickly run out of space. And that's something that we'd love to secure, having that space here locally. Number one, it's great for the whiskey, but reducing those miles and keeping those miles down is super important to us. That's a quick summary of some of the things that we're thinking about. What's stopping us, and what are the barriers? Well, technology is one of them. The available technology. Our boiler is currently gas, and the truth is that, notwithstanding oil, it's for a distillery of our size, the technology to replace that with, let's say, green hydrogen. I would love it to be green hydrogen. God, I'd be happy with blue hydrogen, to begin with, but green hydrogen would be amazing. I think that technology at our scale and the energy storage is, it's just not there yet.
Can I suggest that one of the things that I don't know whether you have done, but there is a very, we've gone to government and actually contributed towards it for a study of a heat system based upon the Medway.
Yes.
I don't know whether you've been in touch with that, but I think you certainly could be a beneficiary of that, and it might be something you want to hook into. I think
absolutely. We're thank you very much, Councillor Doe. Yes, we are. We're in close contact with Rob Dennis and the team, looking at that project. Very interesting and exciting. I think we could contribute to it. We could benefit from it. There are some technicalities why anyway, there's lots of technicalities, but
it's got to be worked through. I know,
absolutely.
It's a long way, but the government certainly is putting its money where its mouth is.
Yeah. River sourced heat pump is a great project. But then finally, funding is, these things are enormously expensive to get off the ground.
But I think the government is wired into actually trying to prove the system and the working model to there we are. Anyway, can I thank you very much for giving us, I think, what is a very good insight into how business actually approaches the situation about climate change, and I think it does yourself and the firm very great credit, actually. Can I just ask whether anyone has any questions you'd like to ask Stephen?
You've got Vince and you've got Stuart, Howard.
Okay, Vince.
Thanks very much, Howard, and thanks, Stephen, for that great overview and presentation. I know I'm not obliged to, but I think probably a declaration of interest is Chatham Maritime Trust was both mentioned by Stephen, but is also in the papers.
I thought you had been drinking whiskey again.
I am a trustee, as is another Russell. Indeed. So look, I think, Stephen, I'm really grateful for your kind of the business story, and look, the Copper River is always doing good things down there, and that's always welcome to see. If I think back to when I moved declaring a climate emergency, and actually Andy Stamp declared around single-use plastic, in both of those examples, part of it was, of course, around getting the council to change what it does, but actually it's about those positive messages to Medway, the place where people do business, come to learn, and actually saying all of us have a role in this. I know the council's position on its 1.6% of admissions. I don't necessarily accept that, but I do accept it's not the only organisation doing stuff to the climate that needs to change. So I think hopefully people will be watching this on YouTube, and if there is a small business owner, they'll be hearing your experiences and they will benefit from that. So thank you for that. And again, I guess through organisations like FSB and Chamber of Commerce, I mean, those are the organisations that need to be hearing those experiences and those of the other businesses laid out in the papers for today, to say, actually, look, the fact that people are thinking about this and are doing positive things, in part because it's the right thing to do, sometimes actually because it is better for the bottom line, which actually, and if you can find the sweet stuff, which is both of those things, and actually if it's a good thing for public relations as well, your point around greenwashing, Stephen, is absolutely right. You know, some businesses, I get utterly frustrated when they will come out and say something, but they forget all the other stuff which is damaging the environment and they've done nothing about. So you're right to highlight that as well. So thanks for what you're doing, and actually it's a good example along with the others we've got in the papers, and there will be others as well. And I think the final thing I would say is it's a key, the council's role in this when it comes to the issue of small and medium enterprises, to support those businesses, to bring them together if there's partnerships available, and to shout about it as loudly as possible. Thanks.
Thanks very much.
Phil, thank you very much. You're very welcome to stay and join us for the rest of the meeting, or if you do have to get back to making money, we'll allow you. But I think we've got one more, Stuart, of course.
That's it. Well done, Howard.
Yeah, thank you. I'll be quite brief. By the way, I have an unproven theory that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, that a small dram of your whiskey means I can turn the thermostat down slightly at home. So I don't know if that counts as
well, I'd rather you have a large dram than a small one, but you know, up to you.
But yeah, what I'm getting, clearly it's not what you might call a green industry, but from what you're saying, you are, it would appear, possibly because you're in industry terms, a fairly new, young company in that world, and I get the impression you're ahead of the curve in a number of ways and experimenting quite a lot to stay ahead of the curve in terms of energy consumption in all sorts of ways. Is that translating into a marketing advantage or a cost advantage? Because I don't see it on your website.
No.
And will that happen at some point, do you think?
Yeah, funny. It's really funny you should say that. And in a way, I thank the council and Katie for the catalyst to actually organise and think about what we are doing, because we are doing a huge amount. We are. I think integrity. We're super conscious of the sort of PR chasing greenwashy look, and you know, very often a lot of what we do is a little bit you know, it's not necessarily quite the same as what the bigger companies are doing. I hate the idea of going out with a PR thing that talks about stuff we'd like to do, which is what a lot of people do, just to get headlines, and us know full well that it's going to be sometimes before we do them. So I rather do things once we've done them, or once I've got a locked-in plan to do them, because you know, that's what, you know, this business is about, integrity. But you're quite right. We should have something on the website, and having organised my thoughts and realised quite how much we are doing, and how we think about sustainability in its broadest sense as well as climate. That's something that is going to go on the website very soon as a page. So thank you very much.
Okay, Steve. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. You now move on, please, if I may. Thank you very much indeed. We now come on to the communications and engagement, which I think Celia is going to lead on, along with Katie.
I am indeed. Good evening, everybody.
Welcome to the meeting.
Nice, thank you. Nice to see everybody. I have been here. I've been listening, and
I know you have, but we
always fascinating, particularly to hear from our friends at Copper Rivet, who obviously we work with particularly closely as well on the communications and engagement side for much of our other work. And I think actually it would be great, Stephen, if we could have a catch up if you're still here, to see how we can sort of use you more as a case study in our comms as well. I think there's some fantastic sort of stories that have come out from this one. So the more we can do it, would be wonderful. So we're going to sort of give you an update. It's been a pretty busy few months for the team, for obviously particularly for the climate response team, particularly for Katie, but also working with the communications team. So we've got a few minutes, so we're just going to take you through a short presentation, if that's all right, to tell you a little bit about some of the things that we've been up to and then kind of what's coming up. So I'm going to let Katie kick off, if that's all right.
Okay, Katie.
Thank you. So last time I was here, I said that we would share more updates on our climate change action plan survey, which we did over the summer. So now we've had a chance to kind of really look at those and bring together some of the highlights. So as you can see on the side that hopefully is up, we had 71 responses received. And some of the key things that came out that I thought would be of interest to everyone is the public priorities. So we asked people to fill in kind of their top 3 of our priority areas, which one's the most priority to them. And the one that came out on top was transport, travel and digital connectivity, but very closely followed by green and blue infrastructure. And then the third most important, but it is a bit of a drop in the number, was planning and development. So those we can see are the 3 most important of our priority areas to the public, or to the people who filled in our survey. And then when it came to their engagement preference, there was a lot of emphasis on online engagement. People wanted to see more online engagement. One of the things that came out is that they wanted to see climate change more on our kind of main social media channels. So obviously we have our climate change Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, which we use a lot, but making sure that when we do post things, we're cross-sharing them to the central channel as well, which will reach more people. And that is something that came out quite highly in the action plan survey, and we have already started actioning, which we'll kind of talk a bit more about later. And then surveys, people want a chance to do more surveys. So we are going to have a look at what we can do in the future and how we can start to engage and use surveys in that. And then third was events. So these were 2 separate options, but they received the same votes, which was existing events. So being having existing events, but also having climate focused events. So that shows that there is interest in having these events to talk about climate change. And then some other kind of key things that came up was that almost half respondents, about 43%, feel informed about what Medway Council is doing to respond to climate change. So while that is higher than in previous surveys, we still want it to be higher. So that's something that if we start sharing more, there's more work to be done. And that point of sharing on those main channels is a way that we can kind of action this. So that's something we have started doing, but we'll continue to work on. But over half the respondents are aware of Medway Council's climate change action plans. That was 59%. Again, really happy it has increased, but still we want 100% of people to be aware. So that's something we'll continue to work on. So it dropped down a bit. So only 29% of respondents agree that they know climate change related campaigns. So we need to kind of increase our campaigns and get more out there with those. And we're having a think about how can we address that. But 84% agreed that their actions can help tackle climate change. So we're clearly a very good space in terms of people feeling that climate change is something they can act on. And 90% agreed that reducing their impact on the environment was a personal priority. So that was a really nice thing to see, that the majority of people in Medway who filled in this action plan do feel that they have kind of a part to play in Medway's journey to net zero. So that was great for us to see. And then in terms of responding to this action plan survey, we have been close to publishing a survey report, making sure that everyone knows that we have read their thoughts, because there's a lot of kind of individual ideas that people shared with us in the action plan survey. So we've done a report to kind of look at their ideas and their suggestions and say that actually this is an action we're already doing, but here's an update for you, and fantastic idea and thank you. We've got actions that we won't be progressing, but we've had a thought about them, but this is why we don't feel that at this time they are right for Medway. And then also the suggestions that were really fantastic, and we will be incorporating them into our work, and this is how we're going to do it. So an example I've mentioned is that we are starting to share even more on our corporate channels. So that will be ready to go out soon, and we're happy to circulate it with all members as well and share it on our social media and on our main one at that. And then we had lots of events happening over the summer, of course. So we attended the Love Chatham Carnival, the Medway Gaming Festival, the Rainham Community Day, the Chatham Family Fun Day, Medway Pride and Wild About Capstan during this quarter. And overall, we spoke to around 1,275 people. And we really increased our engagement while at these events. So we've seen a mass increase of newsletter signups, which hopefully you've seen in our notes on this. And we have started using a game at events to engage with people. So we launched this one at the Family Fun Day, but we also took it to Wild About Capstan. And if you see that kind of the image of that load of laundry, that's an example of one of the tiles in our game. And the basis of the game is having a look at carbon footprinting. And in the game, it's no way to make anyone feel guilty about their carbon footprint, about what they're doing, but just kind of starting that conversation of understanding that everything does have an impact and we can think about it. And also putting into context why we hear what we hear about climate change. So why is it that we say public transport is a better option when you can do it? It's because it's got that much lower carbon footprint, because more people can share that transport method. And we've had some of the best conversations using that. It's really started a lot of very interesting conversations and people were very engaged, and that's been hugely successful. So we're going to continue using this and rolling it out at events. And then I also wanted to touch on two of the events we had during the Great Big Green Week that were quite new for us and that we're very proud of. So we had our Energy Cafe, and we're going to come on a little bit more to that. Celia's going to update kind of how we did the online engagement. I will admit that it had lower than anticipated attendance. However, in the survey we did after, there was a clear kind of need and want for this. So we're going to keep on looking at how we can improve that engagement, how we can get people, because people are engaging online, how can we move that into people actually attending these events, looking at locations and looking at working with charity partners. So kind of looking at where do people want it. Gillingham was actually the main area of people who responded to our survey on what they wanted when it comes to to energy cafes. So looking at that going forward. And then we also had a climate workshop with the Disability Medway Network that was, unfortunately, COVID did get in the way of this one a bit. I had to cancel due to COVID, and then we had to rearrange, and then many of our participants got COVID for the new date. So it did unfortunately mean that we did lose a few of our attendees, but we still had a fantastic session with the Disability Network, and we had representative from the Medway Neurological Network as well. And that brought up some really interesting thoughts, and we've kind of got a report ready on that one. And some of the main outcomes of that was kind of working on our communications and how we make sure that when we do these small changes campaigns, it has that understanding of what is accessible to people. Not everyone can take part in active travel, and we're just kind of giving weight to that so that people who are disabled, who maybe can't do as much active travel, don't feel then being ignored in these situations. And also one of them was saying that they think we should do an online survey with the questions that we spoke about, so that people don't have to come in person, it can be very personal to talk about disability, so that they have that online survey so that they can still share their thoughts and feelings on climate change, on how it impacts them, but also from the comfort of their own home. And then also it brought up that we need to communicate about the emergency planning, and if in the future we start to see more kind of flood risk in Medway, if we see that we've made sure that people know what to do if they are in a disabled household, if they have ill health, and what plannings we have for them, which is something we do, but just making sure that we know that we're taking that into consideration in our communications. And finally, ensure that we make use of the existing disability networks to share about energy efficiency grants. So we have some incredible energy efficiency grants, and making sure that we have these networks and we're sending it to them to share with their members so that they're hearing about those energy efficiency grants. So those are some of the action points we've taken away, and we look forward to continuing that conversation with that group and going forward. So I'll now pass over to Celia to talk.
Before you do, can I just say that I think the amount of work that you and the team have done, a lot of it out of hours work too, weekends and so on, has been really impressive. And you have, when I've visited a number of the events, I've seen the interest that you managed to generate, and I do think that all the members of the group ought to be aware of this, because they really are doing a terrific job, and that conviction comes through. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think one of the things that the team does is they bring these events alive, either through your laundry game, but I think also Katie, at the gaming festival, I think one of the things that we tried to do there was actually to come up with something that was particularly relevant to young people. So we managed to get hold of a number of virtual reality headsets as well, and download a fantastic sort of underwater experience so that youngsters or anybody actually could come along and try it. And sort of engage with the sort of general ideas of of climate change, but just using technology as well. So I think it was a very clever experience actually, and I think I think it's the kind of thing we need to continue to take advantage of these sort of different opportunities to sort of get our message across. So in terms of sort of online engagement, one of the things that we've been continuing to do is sort of push through a number of the council's channels, our messages, and I think that there's clearly more work to do. I think, as Katie said, from the work that came out from the survey, and I'm pleased to let you know that we've actually got someone who we've taken on, or is going to be doing a role specifically to support a lot of our online work for climate change, but also working across sort of Ruth's other sort of frontline services areas as well. So, to do with waste, so we can sort of start to really get across the message. But a lot of those messages will be very much linked back to the environment. So, I think we're kind of quite looking forward to that. And Nat, who is going to be taking that role, has got a huge amount of experience in the sort of, particularly in the domain of social media as well. So I think we're really looking forward to having her continue to sort of pick this role up. So sort of taking a look at some of the things that we have been doing. I mean, we sort of push out a lot of communications through the different channels that we have on social media. So we're very fortunate. We have obviously the council's corporate communication or corporate social media pages. We have the environmental team pages. We also have the climate change pages as well. And particularly on things like Instagram, so that helps us to kind of reach our different audiences across the piece. So if I sort of take, for example, a Great Big Green Week that ran between the 24th of September and the 2nd of October, there were a number of events that were organised by the climate response team, but also by the Green Spaces team, who did a huge number of events during that week as well. So, as well as the Energy Cafe, there were cycling groups, there were nature walking, there were birdwise walks. So there were a business online seminar. So we spent a lot of time sort of getting out there and trying to sort of communicate all of the events that were taking place for that. Across the week, we had about 28 different posts, particularly from the Green Spaces side as well. We had engagement with about sort of 14,000 people, so that wasn't bad in terms of the sort of reach that we had for that week. So and sort of a couple of hundred click-through. So in terms of sort of people sort of finding out more about the events and activities that were being run. So we ran a lot of posts during the course, in the run up to and during the course of that week. For the Energy Cafe specifically itself, we posted out about that particular event 25 times in the run up to the event, and we reached again about just for that particular post itself about 14,000 people. So we were very pleased with that. I think it was maybe it was the timing, and I think it was I think, as Katie said, I think it's a start, and I think we need to sort of try and get out and do some more of this, because I think clearly it did catch the imagination. There was a lot of interest in that, so I think that if we can start to do more of those, I think it would be incredibly helpful. So we want to sort of continue to push that one through, if we can. If we could just move on to the next slide, what we've got sort of coming up now. Obviously, we're in the middle of COP27 at the moment, which is the sort of the current engagement opportunity that we've got going on at the moment. So every single day during COP22, each day has a different theme. So for example, today is all about youth. So what we're doing is for each day, for a different theme, we're actually sort of starting to talk about a little bit about the what's happening across Medway, for each of the different themes. So today we've sort of been talking about what we've been doing with youth and with future generations. So we've put up a post, for example, that talks about how we are committed to engaging and hearing from the voices of young people, and in the sort of whole climate change debate. And we've sort of been sharing with them about how we've been engaging them in surveys, how we've been engaging them in our sort of fantastic City Hall events, where, you know, we had one particular sort of event was all themed around climate change, talking a little bit about how we're working with the Medway Youth Council as well. So talking about the different ways that we're engaging the voice of young people in our climate change activities as well. So, and, you know, a sort of different sort of theme for each day. So that's sort of another way of engaging people. As well as sort of online engagement, we continue to do regular newsletters out. So I think Katie said that, you know, her newsletters are starting to gain in numbers, which is fantastic. We also have a 2-weekly newsletter that goes out in the Medway Matters, it's called. It's our corporate one, and we regularly feature climate stories in that, and we'll continue to do that. And in particular, obviously, after this, we're going to be doing a little bit of work, a bit more of a work now coming up on small changes. That's going to be one of the big sort of things that we're going to try and do through the winter. And actually, small changes, but it's particularly important because I think it kind of also works very well. As well as with the climate change message, actually is about how people can make savings as well, because the two kind of go hand in hand as well. So we'll be sort of giving advice and guidance on how people can both do their bit to protect the climate, but also help the money in their purses as well. So there'll be a sort of quite a big theme, and we'll be doing a particularly big event, or, you know, quite a lot of activity around that, particularly in the new year, but also some in the run up to Christmas as well. There'll be quite a lot of themes as well about how to have if you like, a climate change friendly Christmas. You know, then, so for example, and this is not online, but we'll be complementing it online, but in the Medway Matters that's due out later this month, there are top 10 tips for a greener Christmas, and we'll be taking those and sort of using those to sort of give people advice in the run up to the festive season as well. And we're also kind of very excited that, you know, one of the, you know, looking into the new year, then we're sort of looking at sort of how we can sort of share examples, and as well as working with, you know, fantastic organisations such, you know, as we've been hearing about from Copper Rivet, we've been working very closely now with the Food Innovation Centre at the University of Greenwich. And we want to do some features on some of the fantastic work and the innovation work that's taking place down there. And I think, you know, one of the things that we're very keen to do is sort of position Medway as a real sort of hub for food innovation, food tech, and I think this kind of plays in really nicely, sort of looking at that sort of the whole climate response area. I don't know if anybody's had the opportunity to go down there, and I think it'd be well worth going and having a visit at some point. But I've been down the climate response with the climate response team down to the new lab that they've got down on the campus, and how they're kind of using. They're exploring the possibility of using things like 3D printing, for example, to create something that looks like salmon, feels like salmon, smells like salmon, tastes like salmon, but actually is not salmon. And it's extraordinary, kind of some of the stuff that they're looking at doing. But I think it's certainly, I think some of the sort of the innovative approach to what's happening here in Medway is, you know, really, you know, extremely exciting as well. So. So that's kind of just a bit of an update on sort of what we're planning, particularly around some of the online engagement. We do want to sort of engage more in sort of dialogues, and I think having that in place will allow us to open up and have more conversations about climate change. And but we also want to do it carefully. I think is the word I'd use. I mean, I think everyone's well aware of the opportunities that people take to give people a really, really hard time on social media, and for it to become a place where, you know, you get abused and you get knocked. And so we want to make sure that it's an opportunity for positive engagement rather than very negative and damaging engagement. So it's one of the things that we'll be looking at, how we can sort of do it in a careful way, but in a very positive way as well. I'm going to hand back to Katie just to sort of finish off the slides.
Thank you. So the final one is just an update on our networks that we're kind of working quite closely with. So our Medway Schools Climate Network, we've now had 3 meetings. Our most recent one was on Tuesday. We've got 15 schools coming along. 5 or 6 are really engaged and come to every single one, but we have people, because teachers are so busy, they drop by, and we always make sure that we share minutes of the meetings. We have got, on the next slide, I'll show you the logo that we said last meeting that we would show you. So that's now ready. and will be sent to all the schools with the meeting minutes from this week. And then me and the members, the Medway Environmental Action Network, we're continuing to engage with them, and the terms of reference is still in a draft stage, and we're working with them on that. And finally, the Kent Association of Local Councils, CALC, I went along to one of their meetings. We also had one of our climate response interns contacting all of the local parish councils during summer, but we have been really struggling to engage with parish councils. So any kind of tips, any ideas people have, we're always very grateful to hear those, because that's something we're really looking to engage with in the future. So that's something we'll be keeping taking forward.
Can I suggest you talk to Councillor Buckwell?
Definitely, we'll try that. Thank you. And then our final one is, as I said, this is the logo for the schools network, so it kind of has that correlation with our own logo, and this is how it will look kind of going forward. We can change kind of colors each year so that it's a bit different, and people do need to keep on staying within the network each year. So this is designed. And then any questions that anyone has, of course, Celia and I are happy to answer.
And you've got
very much indeed. Anyone?
Stuart, I think Councillor Trampster has a question.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
just
fine.
saying thank you. I'll be again very quick because I know time's going on. Absolutely amazing what's going on. Thank you for that. Have you pursued the connections with chatty cafes, of course, as well? We've got 4 different venues in Rochester so far, and certainly more being planned, and including, of course, our own Jasper's Cafe in the community hub. The reason I mention that is because they're being set up throughout the winter because of people coming in because of cold, and also getting together and notice. It could be communities there of people. I'm not saying you're necessarily going to have staff and go and attend, but there might be materials and information and so on to be left at these venues. I have a list of venues that do it and when they do it, if that is of some use, and whether that is going to be cost effective and helpful. But I have a feeling that they will be an audience that will be very interested in what we're trying to communicate and share.
Yeah, well, it's a very good idea.
Yeah, Kate, and I don't know if Katie's already linked in with them, but if we're not, we certainly. I mean, obviously we've been involved with them through the through a Better Medway as well. So I think it would be a great idea, and we'll sort of certainly follow that one up. Councillor Trampster.
Some of them are run privately. I know 4 or 5 that are being run. So, but it would take it offline. But there we are. Just a thought.
Thank you very much. That's really
well,
helpful.
thank you for all that you're doing. I think it's absolutely amazing. Thank you.
There are no others indicating, Howard.
Can I thank you both really for all the work you're doing on this, and those in the communications department as well, because I think that you really have brought up the profile, and I think that the value of Katie's work is enormous, because I think what it's done, it's shifted the paradigm a bit. So it's terribly important. Nothing more irritating to me than the fact that the sort of person that sits back and says, well, what's the council doing then? And we're actually trying to break that mold and say, yes, we are doing our bit, but climate change depends on all of us. We can supply leadership, but what you've got to do is to be able to actually work out in your life what you can do to promote climate change. So it's not just marking our paper, in a sense, it's marking your own. Okay. Then, if I can, we'll move on to the action plan. Now, I'm going to assume, if I may, that you've all read these updates, because they're very well written, and I certainly have, and I think they're very good. Are there any particular questions that anybody has on any of that? It does show we're still, I think, going ahead at considerable speed.
And just to endorse your comments there, Howard, that's exactly what we do. We go through the action plan, ensure that we are taking forward those actions. The update's there for members as well. So I think members have seen it. There's nobody indicating either, Howard.
Okay, fine. Then under any other business, if I may move on, the behavioural insights programme. Well, I think there that you'll see there is a report from Chris Giles who's joined us. Is there anything you quickly wanted to say on this? Because I'm very determined to get you away to your council meeting as well, or to our council meeting. Otherwise, we won't make it. So I'm trying to close the meeting in about 10 minutes.
Just very quickly, sorry.
Yeah, Chris.
Just to say that this has now been launched on social media, and we're very keen for everyone to get involved. And this is about what changes you can make on an individual level, but also the key thing is to talk to your friends and family around what can you do to support them. Maybe people who wouldn't necessarily get engaged, but very much with a little bit of just encouragement could maybe do a few things which can impact their home budgets, also the climate as well.
Well, I think it's something very good that we can use in communications, and also I think, Katie, you might be able to use it very much with the community network too. There's a real opportunity for people to do things with money backing. So thank you very much for that.
And then Celia is indicating, Howard.
Yep, Celia.
Yeah, just to add, we're doing a lot of social media around this particular subject as well, Howard, as well, to encourage people to get involved, fill in the survey, and to do all they can. So it's a big piece of work for us as well. We're doing at the moment, just so that you're aware.
And I did say also, thank you. I did also say that we would be looking at the question of single-use products at council meetings. I think, as a general principle, the sooner that happens, the better. We can't go on telling everybody else if we're not obeying our own rules. So I think, Richard, if you could get your, what I would call the housekeeping staff briefed on this, if you need any guidance, I'm sure Katie can give it to you. But, I think we ought to, first of all, do these changes, and secondly, make it quite clear why we've done them.
Yeah. And so we are certainly, you can stop indicating, Celia, we are absolutely committed to single-use plastic, and that has been conveyed through to our FM guys, but Vicky will pick up that conversation again, just to reiterate those messages, Howard.
Thank you very much indeed. Lastly, we have our next meeting is on the 2nd of February at 4:30. So I suppose that means I wish you a happy new year and all the rest of it, as well as a happy Christmas, but somewhat premature. But can I thank all of you for the work that you put into this? And, I think we are really getting somewhere now. It's beginning to move very, very well. And we've got, if you look back at the start of this, you realise how much we have achieved, although there is always a lot more to do. Thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you, Howard. Thank you, members.
I'll now close the meeting. Thank you.
Thanks. Good night.
See you. Bye.
Goodbye.